Four, three, two, one, and we're live. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ian Pruckner. I love this guy. I met this guy here recently. Gentleman walks into my event. I have an event, boardofadvisors.com. We host one of the most amazing engagements for some of the top entrepreneurs, owners, founders, CEOs, investors all across US, Australia, Japan, Argentina, Germany, everywhere. They come from everywhere. This guy walks in, buddy of a friend who's a member, and he says, "Look, hey man, I saw you had something going on here, and we got a chance to meet each other." Little did I know, 2 weeks later, I'm on a plane. Guess who's sitting right next to me?
Here I am.
Ian. He says, "Are you going where I'm going?" I said, I think that's what's transpiring.
Heading to speak at the same event.
We're going to this event for the same gentleman that introduced us on the same plane, and it was a kind of almost a fate meaningful interaction there where we just got to know each other. We were on an adventure. I'd never been to Detroit. Ever.
And you may never go back.
And I may never go back.
No offense to my Detroit peeps representing.
I felt like there's great people in Detroit, but it was like a city that had been the city.
Yeah, it was.
And then it became, just due to the way manufacturing had changed, it became irrelevant, right? And it feels like there's so much opportunity for somebody to come in and do community redevelopment, but you almost need, that's a project, right?
It's a major project. And
is
you're
it
exactly
an opportunity?
Right. It is, but it's an opportunity that spans decades, probably not years. And so, Dan Gilbert, who owns the Cleveland Cavaliers, or used to anyways, Quicken Loans, Rocket Mortgage, all that, during the recession, 08, 09, like he went in and bought up 2/3 of the downtown and single-handedly revitalized like the new center area down there. But there's just so much more to be done. There are more abandoned properties in the city of Detroit than there are people. There were 2.2 million people at one point, and now there's about 650,000. And so it's interesting. And part of it was shifting industries. Part of it was leadership. The city has been ransacked, unfortunately, by pretty bad leadership for a very long time. And ideas have consequences, right? And you can sort of see that sitting in that city. Well, all leadership has consequences, but good leadership generally has good and positive consequences. We're not going to get away from the consequences, but we can direct them into whether they serve us or not, right?
Well said.
Yeah.
You lived there for how long?
Well, I never lived in the city of Detroit. Detroit proper ends at 8 Mile, made famous by Eminem, right? I grew up on 11 Miles, so I was 3 miles away from there. And I lived in Michigan, essentially.
You guys were like neighbors.
Yeah, basically, we were like neighbors. I lived there basically my whole life. I started wintering in Florida about 12 years ago. We couldn't stand the cold, so we would leave. But up until 2 years ago, we had substantial property in Michigan.
I should reintroduce you, ladies and gentlemen, Ian Pruckner. Childhood neighbors with Eminem. I'm sure you're a famous rapper.
Exactly. Kid Rock. Yeah. Kid Rock. Man, I'll tell you what.
You were in the hotbed.
Dude, so Mike, when we were in high school, Kid Rock's Devil Without a Cause album dropped, right?
Okay.
And so he lived in like a little 800, 900 square foot brick house. And his songs were on the radio, like getting mainstream play, just hit. The album had just gone gold. Then it went platinum. And we would drive by his house. He's out there one day mowing the lawn with no shirt on. We're like, Kid Rock. It's like, you know what I mean? Like this is like right on the come up, right?
Cool is that?
Pretty amazing, right? Detroit has birthed a lot of amazing musical talent, a lot of great businesses. Obviously Henry Ford, the big three are there. And so in the 1920s, it was more hip than New York City. There was more money there than anywhere else in the United States. But as things changed, it just didn't adapt very well. There's not an anchor industry there.
Major change was there, because I find it fascinating. You can see the residue of all of that. Like my first time there, I'm, just being on the street, getting, in an Uber, and you can see the residue of how great it probably was at that time.
Yeah.
Or it was at that time.
Absolutely.
What do you think was kind of that hinging thing that just kind of put it in a different direction?
It was a couple of things. So unions, number one. So if you remember in 08 and 09, Ford didn't go bankrupt, but Chrysler and GM both went through major restructurings, right? And sales were an issue, but they had these humongous legacy costs, right? Like you could go and work here, and they would just like leave in the middle of the day. These workers, they'd check each other out. They do nothing, and they make $150,000 a year. They're getting overtime. You can't fire them.
Fat. The
It
company
was
was just
they
fat.
had legacy costs that were crushing them,
Mm.
which is why they had to do the restructuring.
Wow.
But that was 35 years in the making, right? So
Mm.
you have these huge behemoth companies that just have no agility at all. They have no control of their workforces,
Yeah.
and so they're just sort of hamstrung there. You can't innovate because the unions fight you. No, you
Yeah.
can't have that technology. That's going to hurt our jobs.
Yeah.
You can't have those robots. You can't make those things. You can't do this. You can't do that. And so you're like in a fight with Toyota and Kia and all these imports coming over where labor's 1/50th of the cost, and they can innovate because they don't have those rules. And
So the unions were really holding back the innovation,
100%. 100%. I mean,
thinking they're protecting themselves. It's
correct.
a fear mindset.
And it is, and it's actually counterproductive, right? Because when you stranglehold the business that much, eventually the business goes away,
Mhm.
right? And you kill
Mhm.
the goose that's laying the golden egg, so to speak. And so that was a major challenge. You know, there was a lot of rioting there in the late 60s, and that became a major challenge to the city of Detroit.
Mhm.
It wasn't a well planned out city. It's sort of, if you look at the freeways, they sort of separate parts of the city, and that has been a racial and economic
Mhm.
divide for a really long time. And you know, there's a lot of greatness there. There's a lot of great people. There's a lot of great ideas. There's a lot of innovation. There's hubs. There's
Mhm.
great leaders. The sports teams have done well in the years, but you know, it's just they've never had that sort of coagulation of more than one or two or three people at the same time
Mhm.
creating momentum in the
Mhm.
city. It's been one person, Dan Gilbert, lifting the city on its back. It was Mike Duggan when he took over as mayor there, lifting the city on his back, but not really a lot of, you know, concerted effort together. And that's what it
Do you
takes.
think in the future it is a land of opportunity? Or
Absolutely.
you do.
100%.
And what do you think the opportunity is? Is it real estate?
Yes. So Detroit is one of the only major cities in the world where the closer you get to the downtown, the less the real estate costs, because it's just there are blocks that are just
Well, and the
abandoned.
less people there are. I
Yeah.
noticed, like, as we got
There's
right
nobody there.
in-
Yeah, you walk
in
downtown,
this-
there's nobody there. It's a ghost town. Like, where are the people?
there's no traffic.
None. No
There's
traffic.
Like,
No
there's
foot
purpose
traffic.
for even a stoplight.
Yeah,
because
no-
nothing is going
And nobody does stop in Detroit. Yeah, nobody stops in Detroit at the
Then or
stoplights.
now.
Then or
Yeah,
now, right?
that's
You know, it's so interesting. When I was building my first business, I recruited a detective from the Detroit police force.
Okay.
And he was teaching concealed carry classes. I went and took a class, and I just loved this guy. He basically gave an 8-hour pitch for guns, and he was amazing. He was fun, and I'm like, this guy's amazing. He'd be great selling our product. We should talk to him. So I ended up following up with him for a couple of years. He finally got involved after taking some pay cuts, and I never forget. I went to train him on like their roll calls in between shifts, right?
Mhm.
So I went down to one of the precincts down at Gratiot on basically the far east side of Detroit, and trying to catch all the officers coming in off duty, right? And I was sitting and listening to him make his call. So he was a detective at the time, and he was calling, you know, so and so, hey, this is Detective so and so, and I was just calling about, you know, the armed robbery, and be like, oh, we don't know anything about that. He's like, well, I met you at the house. You called us. There was a robbery. You were armed, and we don't know anything about that. And I watched him make 5 or 6 calls that basically went exactly like that. And I'm like, what is going on? He's like, you know, we actually almost wish that, you know, the victims were dead, because then we could prosecute. But if they're not dead, they have to choose to prosecute, and nobody will prosecute anybody because they're in fear of retribution and retaliation.
Wow.
So they'll call us to break up the altercation, but it won't go any further than that. We couldn't convict somebody if our life depended on
They
it,
can't pick it up.
because nobody will. And it's just that sort of culture there, right? And so, you know, in 08 and 09, when the city filed bankruptcy, Detroit had the largest municipal bankruptcy in the history of the country, but there were no public services. Like, you get in a car accident down there, an ambulance is not coming. Drive yourself. You know, yeah. And
Unbelievable.
so it's a joke that you don't stop at the stoplights, but you really don't, because something happens to you down there, you're on your own. And it's gotten a little bit better
Yeah.
over the years, but it's not remarkably better. And again, it's not a you know, an insult to Detroit, because Detroit's a great city, but the leadership has left it in a place that is not great.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a great opportunity. So real estate's a huge opportunity because there's just so much land right by these amazing jewels of buildings and arts and technology. And eventually somebody's going to come in there and they're going to get that for next to nothing. And they're going to build, and 50 years from now, people are going to have made fortunes in that
I
immediate.
can see it. I can see the bones.
Absolutely.
Of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, the gentleman that connected us, he's a big believer in the city. He invests a lot into the city. But you really do have to be a visionary because, again, it's like I said at the beginning, it's not a 3 to 5 year turn.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 10 or 15 or
it's
20
totally,
year turn. And so when you're in.
Shortest term would be 10.
Yeah.
Short.
And people were saying that 20 years ago.
Right.
And we're still saying that today, right? So it's probably on the longer end. And so the people that are in, they got to be all in.
Mm-hmm.
And I have great friends in there. They love the city of Detroit and they invest their time, their effort, their resources, their networks. And eventually that's going to be a big payoff for them. But it is probably a lifespan
mm-hmm.
process of getting it rebuilt.
It's definitely a community movement with certain leaders at certain level, at the high level. But you have all the players in between. There's a macro view where
somebody's got to move them in concert. And that is what has yet to happen. If somebody could come into the city of Detroit, a great leader who could pull the competing interests in together for the good of the people of the city of Detroit and give them a compelling vision and keep people organized and mobile in the same direction, it could happen very, very quickly. But again, that hasn't happened. It's been one team over here or one individual over there, and they're not working together.
It'd be nice you get a mayor that steps in and has that vision, has the competency to do it, doesn't get lost in the politics, and really rallies the other leaders in the community.
Absolutely.
To do so, generating incentives to do so and so forth.
Absolutely.
And I just wanted to talk about that. First off, you're an amazing entrepreneur. You just went through a great exit. You have extreme experience in building teams, selling insurance, now selling technology and real estate, online versions of real estate. I forgot to even mention, the competency that you bring to the table, and at such a young age. I mean, you're a young guy, great family. We had the chance to witness you and the family after the last board of advisors meeting.
Yeah, we had a little get together.
Yeah, that was. I didn't want to put too much. I was reluctant to just kind of send everybody there because it was a newer. And I told Corey this. I said, "Look, I like the guy. I don't want to, trample.
I don't want to impose on him.
place.
Yeah, I don't want to impose.
You know
on
what I
him.
mean? Maybe we just naturally let it happen. I think you created a great bond with a lot of the members. They respect you, and we could maybe do something a little different next time. But you have a wonderful family.
Thank
talk
you.
to your wife. Very accommodating. The private beach out back. How cool is that?
Yeah, it's an amazing piece of property.
I love the beach aspect though, because you have this public access thing on the one side where it allows just enough of a little bit of activity to where you've got a little life going on.
Yep.
But then you have your own thing. Well done.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, what a cool way to start a relationship. You get to go on an adventure to a city you've never been to before and learn all that stuff. So if you're from Detroit, because you're a car guy too, you like cars, but
I like
you don't
cars.
want to know about them.
I don't know anything about them. People are like, "Oh, what is that? What's the thingamajigger 440X?" And I'm like, you know what?
Don't even tell me.
I don't know.
Don't want to know.
I don't know. I like the color. It looks amazing. That's all I got to know, brother. That's all I got to know.
So what? Yeah, let's actually cover that. What are the factors that you're interested in? Like how it sounds, how it looks, the color.
I just like things that are great, right? And the design of certain vehicles is like, wow, that is an amazing looking car.
Yeah,
I'm gonna buy that, right? So that's where it starts, and then it goes to the color. Because if you're gonna have an amazing car, you can't get gray or white or black.
What's up with gray?
I know. I mean, it's my favorite. My friend bought a Ferrari, for something. I don't know the numbers, and it's gray. And I'm like,
458.
yeah, but like this, it's cool, but it's gray. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it can get lost if you're going to spend $500,000 or whatever he spent on the car. It needs to be bright orange or yellow or green. Yeah, I had a lime green McLaren, and that was like, I like the green.
Yeah.
That's why I bought that car. That is sweet looking.
You know, it should be gray. Is like a bulldozer.
Sure.
A bulldozer should be gray.
Matte gray.
Right? Matte gray.
Matte gray.
Yeah, then it looks like a machine.
Absolutely.
You know, they even paint those things bright yellow.
Yeah, I mean, come on, man. You got to at least treat it like a bulldozer, right?
So number one, okay. So if we're listening to the podcast, or all the millions of listeners,
this is Ian's car hacks, right?
Yeah.
Get my course.
First thing, don't buy gray.
Don't buy gray. If you buy gray, we're not going to be friends.
You're failing the course
Exactly.
already.
Exactly.
All right.
Get your money back.
What else? Is it the sound?
So the sound is like third for me. My wife, the sound is number one for her. She's like, yeah, it's got to have that growl to it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really care. I'm in the car. I don't really hear it, right? I'm not like driving around hoping you hear me from 4 blocks away.
Yeah.
That's not my MO.
Yeah.
But it's a nice added benefit. You know, it's cool to sit at a red light and the kids in town are like, rev it up. I mean, you throw that thing in neutral and let it scream. You know, that's fun. But yeah, that's a third factor to me.
So number one is the color.
Number one is the style of the car. Number two is the color. Number three would be the sound, and then, you know, obviously the financial sides of it too. You know, like I don't want to buy something that I'm going to lose on. I want to buy well. I want to drive it for 18 months, get some depreciation on it, get out of it for what I bought it for, something close to what I bought it for, and I just like to flip them. I get bored.
Do you buy used?
Almost always. Yeah, almost always. Mainly because, you know, getting exotic cars new. You know, especially with COVID that had happened and interrupting the supply chains. I mean, you just sort of got to get what's out there, right? So like I'll buy cars from all over the country, depending on
just have it shipped in.
Yeah, exactly. Just send it a couple grand, they'll ship it in, and
sure.
Yeah, no big deal, right? So like I've bought cars in New York, I bought cars in Miami, I bought cars from California. It doesn't really matter. Like, is it what I want? If I want it, I don't care where it is. I'm gonna pick it up.
Right.
But it's hard to do that new with that sort of car because most of them are coming special order, right? And I'm like super ADD, probably like you, right? So like I don't have 8 months to wait. But if I buy a car on special order and I wait for 8 months, that's 8 months of my attention span that's gone. I could have had
a whole nother car during that 8 months.
And many times I do.
Yeah, right.
Like, I get it. I drive it for a while. I'm like, that was cool. And then call up one of my buddies. I'm like, hey man, look, I'm looking for something new. You want to pick this up? And you know, it's amazing how quickly you can divest yourself of those sort of cars for a great price. You know what I mean? Because everybody wants them. They're like, they're sweet. Everybody wants a sweet car.
You know, I was listening to Elon Musk actually on a video this morning, and Joe Rogan was interviewing him. What type of car does he drive on a daily basis? And he goes, well, I don't really drive, but when I do, I drive like the Plaid S, right?
Right.
And he goes, but what, like, if you could drive anything, what would you drive? Because obviously, you assume that he probably has all of those
garage
laying
full
around
of
car, Teslas or whatever. And he goes, no, like that's what I created the car that I wanted.
Yeah.
Right. That I thought was cool. And, I designed it, built it for me, what I thought was cool. And he goes, I just kind of was hoping everybody else would.
Yeah.
Like
What a great
too.
instinct too, right? Like, hey, I'm going to spend a few billion making myself a toy. Hope everybody likes it.
Now, how do you feel about yeah, exactly. And it was really kind of just a big go-kart in the beginning, right? How do you feel about the electric cars?
It's mixed. I don't like, first of all, I think it's a total waste, right? So
sound is number 3.
Yeah, sound is number 3. So like, what electric car I do like is the Fiskars. Those are pretty sweet looking.
Very.
Right?
They
the Karma.
Very sexy car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, so far they have not made an electric car that's cool looking, right? And so cool looking was number 1 for me, right? Fuel efficiency did not enter
we
the
didn't
top
even talk
5.
about that.
Well, I don't even care. Like, what does gas cost for that? If you got to ask that question, you should have known that car, right?
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. So, I think that environmentally, it's like, doesn't make a lick of sense. We don't have the infrastructure to support it. We burn more coal trying to make the electricity than the gas is. So I think that's sort of a farce, that whole thing. I don't like the technology behind it. I don't like the fact that somebody could probably just shut it off if they don't like my viewpoints or they don't like what I do or say. And I think we've got quite a bit of evidence of that sort of stuff
Being
happening.
done.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you know, it's like,
absolutely.
why would you give them the ability to shut that off? Why would you give them access to all of your money in some sort of digital currency? It's the same thing, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, nobody's having problems interacting right now. We've been transacting for thousands of years in this manner,
Hmm.
pretty well, no
Hmm.
problems, right? But you know, it's about control, and I don't like that. That's why
So
I buy cool
you're
cars.
referring to the CBDCs.
To the central bank digital currencies.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
exactly,
know where you're going. We can get into
exactly.
that too.
Oh boy,
That's a mess.
we
Uh,
might end up on
so
some like conspiracy show.
yeah, I did. I grabbed the plaid. Oh well, the controversy number one there. Well, controversy is good marketing, and
It is good
you're a
marketing.
great marketer.
Well,
I
thank
mean,
you. I appreciate
yeah.
that.
Uh, I did buy the plaid, and I have to say I was not in love with it in the beginning. Um, I have always really liked the exotic or the
Sure.
muscle car aspect, and pretty much just filtered through trying all the different ones. Um, the longer I've had it, the more
It grows on you.
it does grow. It's so easy
Yeah.
and advanced and capable that
And we know you're taking naps in them on the way to and
well,
from the house.
I'm
Right?
still exploring with that whole self-driving thing. I'm amazed that you can't take a nap because you're constantly going, "Oh my God, it's literally doing this." You
Wow.
know,
Yeah.
you're almost watching everything happen. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But the capability and just how easy it makes everything, like to get from say here to you in Sarasota, I don't feel tired after you drive. There's no, like you're not even really braking because the regen slows you down.
Right.
It's just not work. And when you drive another car, like if I get into another car, it's weird. Like, what are all these buttons for?
Yeah. Why do I have to do all this
Why do
stuff?
we need buttons? And why do we need vents? And why?
Yeah.
Because there's nothing in it. It's
Yeah.
just super sleek, right? So it took me a while to kind of become accustomed to it and like it. Even my wife was like, "You don't like it, dude. Get something else. You don't like it. I can tell you don't like it. Why are you spending the money if you don't like it? Get something different. Get rid of
Yeah.
it." And I'm like, I'm not giving up on it because I want to understand what Elon understands that I don't understand.
Yeah.
So I want to know.
There you go.
So a little bit of an immersive, but I do agree with you. It's got to look good.
Yeah. Absolutely. I just, for the price of these cars, it's like you can buy a pretty sweet looking car, and they just sort of like look like sedans to
Yeah.
me, most of these cars. And, I'm sure they'll get better. And
You know what they did a great job on is that Corvette, that new Corvette for the
Oh,
money.
you like that?
I
Ugh.
think they did a
Ugh.
great job.
So I've had a bunch of Corvettes. I love Corvettes. I will not
You
buy
don't like the new body
the
style.
mid-engine. No, because if so, from the front they look sweet,
Yeah.
but it looks like somebody forgot to engineer the back. Like they
I
ran
would
they
agree
ran out
with
of
that.
they ran out of the budget for engineering about 3/4 of the
I'm
way
not
through
in
the
love
car.
with the back.
Yeah.
I do agree with you on that.
It
But
looks
the front
weird.
looks amazing.
It does.
The side profile, especially from the front angle, looks great. They did a great job with the side scoops.
Yeah.
The back, they just ran out of
Yeah,
enthusiasm.
exactly. And it's like, and they were going for so much over market. We
Yeah.
looked at it. My wife looked at it. She sort of wanted a yellow convertible. We went and test drove it. Have you seen the interior of it? The big like center arm that sort of divides the
It's
two.
a
That's
lot-
a little strange.
It's a lot going on down
There's
the
a lot.
middle,
Yeah,
right?
there's a lot going on
Yeah.
in the middle. But I had the generation before that. I had the generation before that. And Corvettes are great cars, American muscle. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? There's for the pricing, there's not a faster, better, sexier car
Yeah.
anywhere.
For the money.
But
yeah.
but then they threw up all over it and made it. They threw up all over it and like, I'm gonna have to wait for the next gen. But I
Yeah.
remember when the generation before came out and nobody knew what they were. They sort of looked like Ferraris from the
Mhm.
side and the back, and you're like, what is that?
Yeah.
It's a Corvette. And I love those cars. Those were great cars.
That's awesome. So let's take a look here at the Mountain Is You. My wife is actually reading that book now, and I see that it's one of your favorite, or one of the ones you're reading currently. Tell me a little bit about that.
I just finished it.
What are you learning from that?
Yeah. There's a lot in the book, but it's essentially, why do we self-sabotage? And everybody has self-sabotage mechanisms. You, me, everybody listening. They're just all sort of positioned at different levels. And probably the greatest insight that I took, and I read something similar in a book called The Science of Stuck by Dr. Brett Frank, who I
Mhm.
actually had as guest on my podcast a little while back. And basically what she was saying, she was talking about addictions,
Mm.
and The Mountain Is You is talking about self-sabotage. But one of the most interesting things are these are behaviors that we know we don't like. They don't benefit
Mhm.
us. We want to stop. We're
Mhm.
consciously aware of them. And yet we seem to be slave to them in some ways, some capacities. Why is that? And we see them as bad things that we need to get rid of most of the time. And the interesting thing about that book is it kind of turns out on its head and says, the reason that you keep these, even though you don't want to keep them, is because they're meeting fundamental basic needs in your life. And so they're actually providing good things to you in bad manifestations. And so that's a really interesting take, but it's also very powerful when it comes to making long lasting and permanent change, because instead of trying to fight the bad, it becomes a battle of understanding the good. What is the need that is being met here by this? Why do I continue to have destructive behavior? What is the
Mm.
underlying need that I'm meeting through that behavior? And how do I meet that more productively?
So identifying the need and then exchanging the quenching of that need with something that is more productive.
Correct. Exchanging the mechanism by which we're meeting that need to something that's positive.
Rationally addressing the need versus like this subconscious kind of direction.
Yeah, or shame or guilt or whatever, which doesn't solve your problem. You just feel bad about yourself, which generally doesn't make
Is there
things
is
any
there one of
easier.
those that you'd be willing to share with us?
What do you mean?
In the sense
A
of like,
self-sabotage mechanism?
right.
Yeah, so I wrote about this in my book, actually, two sorts of losers, and I heard about this from a friend of mine, and I just sort of expanded on the concept. But we all lose in life, but the number one thing we do is we try to avoid loss pretty
Mm-hmm.
much at all costs,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's two main avoidance mechanisms. There are avoiders and minimizers. Avoiders are people who will take themselves out of the situation. They'll take themselves out of the
Mm-hmm.
game. They
Mm-hmm.
won't start because they're afraid of losing. And then there are minimizers. Minimizers are people who minimize the win, right? Money isn't everything. You don't need to do that. Social media profiles, and it doesn't matter you're following. You don't need to be X or Y. Why do you go to the gym so much and you look too big? They minimize the wins, right? So to excuse themselves from having to win. Right. If winning isn't all that important, then it's not so important that I'm not doing anything about
Mm.
trying to win. And so we sort of all have one of those two,
So you have the minimizer. What was the
and
other
the
one?
avoider.
And the avoider.
So the avoider doesn't even engage. The minimizer just excuses the lack of engagement. And ultimately, we're all one of those. I'm an avoider, right? And I told a story in my book. I love baseball growing up. I still love it. I coach my son's team, and it was just something I loved as a kid. Every single day I played baseball. I was reasonably good at it. And I can remember being in the Little League World Series in Michigan, and I was one of the best pitchers in the league. We were game 3 of a 3-game series. And I can remember pitching myself into a jam. We were up by a couple of runs. I loaded the bases, no outs. And we're in game 3. We're 1-1. So this game is winner
Oof.
take all, right?
That's,
I mean,
that's not
yeah,
looking good.
it's not fun, right? And so, but here I am. Everybody thinks I'm this great pitcher. I've got this great record. I have this image that I need to hold on the inside about
Correct.
who I am and what my competencies are. And I could not, Mike, bear the thought of going through another batter and losing the game for this team, and just what that would do to me and how people would look at me and feel about me. And so, lo and behold, coach, my arm, can you take me out? I had him take me out of that game, and I spent the rest of the game on the bench with an
Mm.
elbow that wasn't hurting, because I was afraid of what was on the other side of pushing through that pain of the
So you
unknown.
avoided.
I was an avoider, and that's always been my mechanism. I get out of things before I have to see really what I'm made out of. And so in business, when I started, that was my biggest fear. When I started making real money and having a lot of success, I would wake up 2-3 times a week in the middle of the night, scared that I wouldn't be able to keep it going, and that I would leave that like I left everything else in my life when it got hard. And that was baseball, skateboarding, other sports, music, right? I was that guy that was good at everything but never great at anything, because the price that it took me to be great was failing. I had to fail. I had to get
Very
to a
well said.
point of being at the edge of my competency all the time, which is how you get great at things. You go to the very edge and then you jump off and you see what happens, and then you retool. You learn from the loss. Every loss brings with it two things: data and pressure. Why did I lose? and how do I win, and the pressure of not wanting to lose again. And I couldn't stand that pressure. So I just abandoned whatever it was I was doing that I loved, that I was passionate about, because it got hard, because I might lose, because I might not be as good as I or anybody else thought I was. And then I just start again with something new and immediately have quick success with it. And that was sort of my MO in life. I would avoid ever really having to look in the mirror and see, what are you not good at here that's causing you to not be able to move from good to great and then to world class. And that was something that I had to overcome. And the need that was being met there was just the preservation of my ego and my own self-image. I'd rather be deluded that
So at what point did you decide to crush that and hit it head on?
When I started in business and it was do or die, it was like, you know what? I built an incredible life for my family, many times better than I had. And this is something I'm going to promise myself not to walk away from when it gets tough. And when it did get tough, I had to make that choice.
So do you think the family had an impact on that?
They were a motivating factor for sure. But, you know, at the end of the day, you do that. That's a choice that you make for you. Nobody else can make it for you. Family can't make it for you. Your parents can't make it for you. Your coworkers, your boss, mentors, coaches. Ultimately, at some point.
Well, the reason that I asked that, it sounds like through life, you weren't making that decision for you. I'm asking, did you make it more because of the family?
At that point, I didn't have kids. I was married, but I did not have kids yet. And to me, it was really.
Well, sometimes you make it for the team. You care about your team.
Sure.
You care about your family. You care about the other people
Sure.
involved. I'm just saying, do you think you were making it more for them or yourself?
For myself.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's why it was permanent, because when we make it for other people, when those relationships change, as they sometimes do, then our decision-making capabilities change with it. But when you do it for you, it's something that nobody can take from you.
Yeah.
And that was a lesson that I've learned that I've been able to apply for the last 18 years. It's helped me in enormous ways and in everything, in my relationships, in my business, in my health, you know, like learning how to not quit when things get tough and when they get really tough sometimes. And that determination on the other side of that is where your breakthroughs are.
Yeah.
Always, essentially almost
Now,
always.
I know you were on a pretty tight schedule. Did you have extra time past that original stop time?
Yeah, we can keep moving.
We can.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm assuming you'll edit this. A little interaction here.
Why would we edit? This is gold.
This is gold.
What
All
we
right.
did is
I was just going to send a text and say, hey, man, give me another 10, 15 minutes. We'll be good.
I mean, if we decide to give people more that was really good information there.
Yeah, let's keep moving.
Understanding the difference between the avoider or the avoiding personality or mechanism and
the minimizer.
Because I think a lot of us are that avoider.
Yeah, absolutely.
And which one do you think is worse?
They're different. They're not better or worse or right or wrong. They just are. And whatever you are, you've got to acknowledge, right? So awareness is the first step to change. You've got to be aware, then you've got to acknowledge it, and then you got to work with it.
Now, do you believe that part of avoiding or going around something is a good strategy? I mean, if you know that it's not going to play out well.
Sure. So avoiding a clear mistake where there is no upside and nothing to be gained on the other end and nothing you need for the next level of your life is wisdom, right? That's good. But when it is on the other end of that is something that is necessary for your growth, necessary for your calling, necessary for your destination, then you're violating that calling on your life to not go through that, right? So I don't think it's better or worse. It's just we need to be aware of it so that we know. For me, I have one word, and that one word has been with me since the decision that I made 18 years ago to fight through, and that word is stay. And I've said that to myself hundreds and hundreds of times in many different capacities in my life, sitting in tough situations. Stay in the room, stay in the relationship, stay in the fight, stay in the business, stay with the coaching. I need to remind myself, stay. Everything you want's on the other side of that word.
That's really good. That's great. Yeah, you're surprisingly clear in thought. Not that I didn't think you were, but you're clear in thought and very well articulating the lessons that you've gone through.
That's how we build the next level of our life, right? It's
Hmm.
on those building blocks.
Yeah, a lot of people have a hard time doing that though, uh, or they speak about it, not to it, and you speak very well to it.
Well, I appreciate that. One of the mantras that I've tried to live by that I would teach my teams is in life it's lesson repeated until lesson learned.
Hmm.
And if you want to go fast, then you got to learn quickly. You've got to adapt and assimilate quickly. And so the best way to do that is to fail a lot and to fail quickly and to learn from that so that you don't keep repeating that and you can graduate to new challenges
Hmm.
and new areas where you've got to push yourself to that point of failure.
Are there any? Who do you look up to, or who do you believe is like a mentor for you?
You know what? I've been really blessed to have a lot of them in my life. Starting with um, at 19, I ended up becoming a follower of Christ, and I had a pastor there, a little storefront church, 40 people in it, but he mentored me. He took me under his wing. He taught me, and that became a foundation of my life. He was probably my first real mentor in business. I've been blessed to have a couple of mentors that are billionaires that have been able to teach me enormously through their lives and their lifestyles and just who they are and how they are. And then I'm just an avid studier of people who are great
Hmm.
from the past and the present, right? I want to know what these people know. I want to understand how they think, and I want to model as much of that as I can. So we've been really lucky to be surrounded by some great people.
Speaking of studying, what are you studying now? I noticed that some of your most controversial topics are AI. Getting into it or using it. What are you studying around AI right now?
I think studying would be an over an
What are you
over
doing with AI?
classification of that. Um, I'm trying to understand it. I'm trying to understand its secondary and tertiary reactions. Like, okay, this thing can do a bunch of stuff. That's really great. Um, but how does that interface with human beings and what does that mean for the future? And I think that those are some really interesting questions. I think they're questions we're, as a society, going to have to grapple with sooner than later, because the rate at which these things learn, it's not long before they can do an enormous amount more than human beings can do. And that's probably not a great thing if that's not controlled and well regulated. I'm not a fan of regulation for the most part, but it's an interesting world.
Hmm.
It's moving so rapidly. I mean, it's really pretty crazy. So I'm trying to understand, how's this going to affect me? How's this going to affect my community? How's it going to affect human civilization? What do we need to be doing to deal with that, or at least prepare for it?
Hmm. Hmm. So the AI perspective, I kind of believe that it's here to learn about us and for us to leverage it, right? So,
In its proper usage,
right.
I would agree with you.
Hmm.
Very powerful tool.
You know, us learning about it really is not the idea, right? I mean, it can learn about us so much faster than we could ever absorb what it can do, what it's about. I think it's more about the aspect of how do we use it? How do we leverage it? How do we put it to work?
And probably more importantly than that, how do you control it?
Well, it will ultimately become exactly that. Right now, I think we're trying to figure out how do we put it to work? How do we benefit from it? How do we use it?
Sure.
But absolutely agree. How do we control it so that it stays a healthy tool
Absolutely.
versus a cancer?
Absolutely.
And that's the big fear, right? Is this thing going to take us over?
And I think people have been afraid of that with everything, TVs and
The internet.
radios and X-rays. And yeah, I mean, this is not a new phenomenon
Remember,
of human beings being deathly afraid of new technology, right? Like
yeah,
that's not
that's
a
what we
new
do.
thing.
We do it well.
Yeah, exactly. And so far we've survived
Yeah.
as a species.
Remember year 2000?
Yeah,
We,
Y2K.
we were actually afraid of the year.
Yeah.
It was what was going to happen in Y2K.
All
everything
the
was gonna
computers
end.
were going to reset, right? Because they didn't think far enough ahead when they were making them to give them, they only gave them a two source date code, right? 98, 99. When it gets to zero, the whole game stops, right? Or so they thought. Nothing happened. We were all waiting for the lights to go out, but
So there was no. So the one, there was no two.
yeah, there was no 2000. It was just 00. When you get to 99, great, but then there's no 100 or
Oh, the 2 date code instead of the 4 date
that's
code.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it just thinks it's starting over. But
Interesting.
yeah, no problems. Nothing
Uh,
happened there, right?
so tell me a little bit, just so we don't completely go sidetracked. Tell me a little bit about the business. You've got a great
Yeah.
business, a healthy team, a healthy platform. Part of one of the bigger struggles that I see people uh, when trying to build a business is the team.
Sure.
They just they suffer in the recruitment and the retention, the engagement of building a great team. You built a great team with your prior business. It was actually a sales force
Yeah.
in the prior business,
Yep.
which is even sometimes harder to build than a team because they have to know how to sell.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are afraid of selling. So tell me a little bit
And they're
about
not on salaries. That team I built.
tell me a little bit about that.
We had 1,400
Yeah.
licensed reps all over the country, all of whom were 100% commission. And, top guys made $70, $80, $90,000 a month off of straight commission. And we built something on a vision and on a dream of what somebody could become, what they could do with their life if they wanted to go be somebody instead of just settling for average and whatever life gave them. They could, they didn't like the meal life provided them, send it back and order again. And it was fun. We spent 16 years doing that. It was an absolute joy. It was a privilege to be able to lead and mentor so many amazing people and help them change their life in some way.
Do you feel as if it were personal development as much as team and sales development?
100%. You build the person builds the business, right? And so when you build great people and you teach them not what to think, but how to think and how to make better decisions and how to trust their instinct and how to develop that, then, have you ever seen, I used to tell people this, you ever seen an oak tree with a motivational speaker in front of it? And the motivational speaker's like, come on, oak tree, you got this. You're great. You're going to grow high. It's in you. You just got it grows. That's what it does. And that's what people are supposed to do. But then we get all this junk that we pick up along the way from people with limitations, putting their limitations on us, putting their bad thinking on us. And all of a sudden we're in a cage that we made with thinking we never wanted that somebody gave to us. And we're not growing. We're stuck. We're stagnant. But growth is not that's the natural way. That's what should be happening. And so if you can unchain some of that, people flourish. They grow into exactly who God wanted them to be, the reason they're here on that earth. And so, yeah, it's 90% personal development and 10% skill set and other tactical things that people need to learn. But if you think right, you'll always get to the right answer eventually. You'll fail a bunch, but you'll deal with that failure appropriately because you're thinking correctly. You'll learn from it, you'll adjust, and you'll make the changes, and eventually you become who you always thought you could be, or maybe even somebody better than you thought you could be.
Is that what you ask when somebody fails in the business? What did you learn from it?
Sure. What are you changing? You already paid the price with the pain. Let's get a reward for the price that you've paid.
Can you tell by their answer if they're getting that reward?
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You can tell how people
What
are
if
going.
they don't get it?
Then they're going to be back there again. Remember, lesson repeated until lesson learned. Might not look exactly the same, but that thing's coming back around, so you better get ready.
How long do you wait for them to learn that lesson before you realize that you can't afford to have them on the team still learning the lesson?
That's a good question. So in that business, the answer was all eternity. Because they were commissioned, it didn't cost them anything to be here. So if you tripped across a sale once a year, God bless you. That's fantastic. It was revenue to the business with no associated expense. That was fantastic. You have to make sure that you don't put your time there.
Kind of like a real estate agent.
Sure. The best way to think about it. It's like real estate. If you don't sell a house, you don't sell a house, but you're not taking up health insurance costs. We're not paying for air conditioning in some office for you to sit in all day. And so it really is an interesting challenge. But what I've told people, if you can build a commission-only sales force, you can build anything.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you have salaries to help encourage people to stay around, it's an easier ball game than, hey, you kill and eat what you kill. And if you don't kill anything, then you starve. That's a tough thing for people who don't have that skill set and mindset developed.
So 1,400 across the nation.
1,400 through 48 locations.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. It was so much fun.
And you exited that business
We
a
did.
couple
We
years
sold
ago?
that business about a year ago.
About a year.
Yeah, actually just a year ago, last June.
Wow. And you're looking, so in 1 year, you're now looking at potentially even another exit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're building a pretty amazing company with a pretty amazing proprietary product, and this has been the biggest challenge and one of the biggest joys of my life, because we're having to learn so fast. When you're a startup, I mean everything is 24/7, go go go, and you are growing and figuring it out as you grow, and you're building your infrastructure, and you're building your systems, and you're building your teams. That's been an amazing journey, and
But this
yeah,
is a different style team because this is not.
totally different. This is we're essentially in the technology, data, and fintech space, and so instead of salespeople, I'm dealing with engineers and tech people and data people who are very different than salespeople.
Oh, I was
They are
gonna say, I
motivated.
was just that's night and day.
They are motivated and communicated to in a vastly different method. And one of the other things that was so interesting, because in the sales business, it was sort of like a rinse repeat. You had one avatar that you were creating over and over and over and over again. So you dial in on that system and then you let it rip. And time is just your compounding factor. You can run the same thing. From year 3 to year 16 in that business, I essentially did the same thing. I just did it with larger groups of people more quickly. In this world, everybody has such different functionalities and has to do such different pieces of the puzzle that just managing all of the pieces that are going on is a challenge in and of itself. And then staffing those and having them run and operate through their KPIs and having to develop those. Like when it's a proprietary product, nobody's ever done. It's the only thing in the world like it. There's no guru
Yeah.
to go to when you hit the wall.
There's no model.
Yeah, when you hit the wall, you hit the wall. And then you got to figure out how to go over, under, or through that thing. And it's been interesting and fun and challenging at the same time.
Is that where you think the metal is tested with the partners?
Absolutely, right? Because, again, when you're and I have 4 other partners in that business, great human beings. And, it's one of the reasons we've had such quick success. We've done considerable amount of revenue in the 18 months that we've been running that business. We've had a couple of offers on the table that are substantial for an exit that, quite honestly, is sooner than we would want to exit, but they're interesting offers.
You
And
can't go broke taking a profit.
yeah, that's true. You can't. But it's definitely an interesting challenge on every facet all of the time,
Mhm.
and you've just got to constantly reinvent and challenge yourself to move forward on every
Mhm.
piece of
Mhm.
that. It's
So the from your perspective, building a great family, now another great business, you live a great lifestyle in the sense of it's healthy. It's I feel like there's a wise approach. You invest your time well with the kids. What is it that you would say? And I love the illustration with the avoider and minimizer. That was really solid. I've not heard that before. You said what that came out of which book?
So I actually wrote a book
Oh,
that
you wrote that book.
that is a chapter in.
Hmm.
Yep, and that's actually an idea that I heard from a friend who heard from his mentor, and over time, as I learned more and more about people, I sort of put a framework together around it. Here's what these people do. Here's how they react. Here's how to counteract those measures. Here's the things you put in place to help yourself.
If we could leave the listeners, millions, with something, a little bit of a framework, a little bit of words of wisdom, something that if we just crystallize the conversation today, that said, you know what, I want them to take away that from what we discussed, because there was a lot of great stuff there. And a lot of it was, bringing more color to you. The value, though, that I think you were able to clearly illustrate was it was interesting. I found myself listening to what you had to say, and that you said it so well. What would you leave the listeners with?
So to round it out, you were talking about the family and the time and
Mhm.
all of that. One of the things that I've tried to live my life by as best as I can is that consistency is always better than intensity. And there's a lot of guys that are intense and they'll grind out hard and then they stall out
Mhm.
and then they rust out and then their life falls apart. And one of the mantras that I've tried to build out is I want to have 5 F's: faith, family, fitness, finance, future self. These are the 5 most important things in our life: who we are now, the people we're with, and who we're becoming. And what I want to
do that again. Faith,
family, fitness, finance, future
future
self.
self.
Who are you going to be tomorrow and next year and next decade? And what is your legacy going to be? And I want to have a schedule every day where I am investing in those people and activities. Because if you don't invest in your future, one day you're going to have to live there. Right? And you're going to live in the byproduct of whatever you did there. And so consistency to me has always been better than intensity. One of my secrets, people always, how do you do so much? You're running all these different businesses and you've got this, and you still have time to coach your kids and travel, and you never seem to be working all that much. And for me, it's, I want to build rhythms that are consistent. If I can't do it for 10 years every single day and love it, it's not going to work for me. I don't want to burn out. I want to build something where I can just keep going like this every single day. And people might run past me for a little while. They might get something bigger going for a little while, but they're probably not going to outlast me because I'm going to build a rhythm of consistency. I used to tell people this all the time. I could do what I'm doing now for the next 20 years and never bat an eye. I don't need to build a life that I have to take a vacation from. Every day I live on vacation for part of the day, and then I do things that are meaningful for part of the day, and I grow myself spiritually and physically for part of the day, and I invest in my family and other relationships for part of the day. And I can do that every day, and it's extremely fulfilling. And every day you're a little bit better in every area than you were the day before. And that's little things done daily that create the big wins that everybody wants, right?
Very well said. I mean, that's how you win in boxing. Usually the one who can outlast.
Sure.
Everlast.
Life's really about outlasting your challenges.
Yeah. What if somebody wanted to learn more about what you're doing, what's a URL they could go to?
That's a good question. So ianpruckner.com is an easy one. championecommerce.com is learning a little bit about some of our products, some of our proprietary products that we've created. You can go to my Instagram at Ian Pruckner. You can go to Facebook at Ian Pruckner. You can go to TikTok, but all you're going to see there is dances that my 14-year-old daughter makes me do with her. So if that's your gig, see me on TikTok.
Do that as well.
I do that as well. I'm a man of many talents. What could I say, Mike?
And if you want to meet you, you can also go to boardofadvisors.com.
Yeah, absolutely.
And look to potentially be at one of the upcoming meetings. We do those every quarter,
Every
90
quarter.
days. And then sometimes we even go to your house right
Yeah,
afterwards.
absolutely.
Which is very cool.
Yeah.
Ian, what a great conversation today. Again, I love the fact of just doing this. And when the interviewee or the relationship across the table is so interesting, and I find myself almost taking mental notes and just kind of getting, I feel like it's making me better at certain points where I'm enjoying the conversation. I definitely enjoyed it with you today. So
Well,
well
likewise.
done.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It was a lot of fun.
Absolute pleasure.
Hey,
Thank you,
appreciate
sir.
you.
Let's do it again.
Yep.